Hi, I'm Kylie, and this is my final um, presentation. My title for the final presentation is Significances of and Challenges to the Cultural Exchange between East Asia and the World in Historical Times. My thesis is the exchange of technology and ideas between East Asia and the West created a clash of cultures that both benefited and harmed the global community. First things first, where is East Asia? East Asia is located on the Eurasia continent, and it is located to the east on the eastern part of Asia. It includes the countries of China, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and Taiwan. East Asia is actually called uh, this because it is the furthest east from a Western perspective, not because it actually is furthest east. And it is part of the three Easts, which are the Near East, the Middle East, and the Far East. So one of the earliest forms of exchange is called the Silk Road. And the Silk Road was a network of trade routes spanning from east to west. Uh, on the routes, there was a lot of things that were traded: technology, ideas, commodities, silk, spices, gunpowder, um, art, weapons. There are many things that were traded along this route, including some bad things, which includes the Black Death. So the Black Death, or Yersinia pestis, is a bacteria that causes pustule, boils, death, etc. Very painful way to go. The origin was probably northwestern China, though there are some sources that say it could have been the steppes. It could have been southwestern China. Um, So essentially what the Black Death did is, as it traveled along the routes of the Silk Road, and it wiped out millions in its wake. To get a grasp on the gravity of the situation, there was a Chinese census in 1200, and there was one taken in 1393. There were 120 million people before the Black Death, and after the Black Death, there were 65 million people. It hit Italy in 1347, and it absolutely decimated Europe, killing probably 2/3 of the population. I have a little animation here that shows it starting yawn, and it's slowly making its way across Asia into Europe. And as it slowly makes its way across, it's actually very quick if you look at the thing. It's just slow on this. It absolutely decimates the population here. Millions of people died. All right. So the next topic here is of Christian mercenaries. One of the most well-known and successful Christian mercenaries was a Jesuit mercenary by the name of Matteo Ricci. He did his work as a missionary for about 30 years in China. And the reason he was so successful is because he adopted so many customs and characteristics of a Chinese scholar. What he did is he adopted the long sleeves, the flowing robe, the high collar. He grew his beard long. Um, he held the fans because it's essentially one of those very important items that you would have on you every day, a fan. He was able to, because of these things, he was able to get people who were higher up to listen to him because he was dressed and acted as a Christian, not as just a Christian mercenary, but also as a Chinese scholar. Uh, and through him, we were able to give, the West was able to get much information and goods while they were able to exchange technologies that the Chinese had not seen, such as a world map uh, and sailing technologies that they had not yet developed. Another example of a Christian mercenary, though not as good, is Father Fouquet from The Question of Who. Father Fouquet, the reason he wasn't good is because essentially, while he was very enamored by Chinese culture, he didn't understand or communicate well with his worker, um, Who didn't clearly understand the terms in which he was being employed. And because of this, he, in Father Fouquet's eyes, acted inappropriately, and was assumed to be insane. And this is all simply because of a lack of communication, uh, and a lack of understanding, which is essentially the exact opposite of how Matteo Ricci succeeded. So, a consequence, actually, of Christian mercenaries and their presence is the unification of Japan. And this can be seen through Oda Nobunaga. Uh, he's seen as one of the great unifiers of Japan. What he did is he used Christian missionaries, merchants in the religion itself to his advantage. Um, Essentially, what he did is he took Christian merchants and missionaries, and through them, he acquired guns. And when he acquired guns, he outfitted his troops with guns. And they tore through Japan and were able to easily unify it. Well, I shouldn't say easily, but they were able to unify it very less difficultly. And as a further consequence to the presence of Christian missionaries, Toyomi Hideyoshi, he actually wound up banning Christianity in 1597. And he did this because of the religion's political ambitions. He did not like the agenda of the Portuguese, the intolerance of the Portuguese of the main religions, Shinto and Buddhism, and the fact that they were enslaving Japanese citizens and carting them off to other countries. So the next topic is the mystical Orient. And essentially, this is the lure of the Orient, you could say je ne sais quoi of the Orient. This is kind of exemplified in the attraction to the ukiyo-e by Van Gogh. He would actually take Japanese woodblock carvings, and he would paint them in his own style using his own his own palette, and he would recreate them. It's very interesting to see these because essentially what he's doing is he's creating his own vision of how he saw the Orient. And he essentially is exoticizing. To him, it's very exotic, it's primitive, it's closer to nature, it's not as industrialized. So to him, it's essentially a utopia, for lack of a better word. A consequence of this is fetishizing the East. What he and many other people did is they would look at the East and they would say, they're so different, they're so primitive, they're so close to nature. I love it. I gotta have it. And they would put them on a pedestal to the point where it would actually be detrimental. You can actually clearly see this in M. Butterfly, the movie. Gallimard, what he does is essentially he kind of underestimates or doesn't even think that uh, someone like Song Liling would be so complicated to uh, be a spy. He doesn't think of her as complex. He doesn't think of her as crafty as a Westerner. Um, he just doesn't see it coming. He doesn't want to see it coming. And so when it turns out that Song was actually a man this entire time, uh, it not only comes as a much of a huge shock, but also comes as a very telling, I'd say, teaching moment. It's actually done much to a lesser extent, I'd say, in The Last Samurai, but it's still indeed done. What they do is Tom Cruise as Nathan Algren, he is taken prisoner, and eventually he comes to respect the rebel samurai. And what the rebel samurai do, what the rebel samurai do is, to him at least, they stand for the last samurai, the only samurai left, the last thing keeping Japan from modernizing and becoming less traditional. And essentially, what they stand for is the identity of Japan. Instead of uh, a part of their culture, he's in The Last Samurai, they're equating it with the culture itself. And they're idealizing these samurai as not just as a warrior class, which they were, but as essential guardians of the Japanese way. And unfortunately, that is not the case and was not the case. Um, so, with fetishizing the East, you could actually just damage not just perception of the East, but how, not just Western perception of the East, but how the East perceive themselves. And that's just not great. All right, these are my works cited. And